Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Steven Universe episode review. This one is going to be for Season 4, Episode 9, 3 Gems and a Baby. So getting straight into it, I really enjoyed this episode. I don't think, given the episode itself, there's a whole lot to actually criticize within the episode. The only thing I'll say before I get into basically the positives is just that I definitely would question why the previous episode was given the 22-minute special treatment as opposed to this one. This one was just a standard 11-minute episode, and I feel like the premise for this, the idea behind this episode, was so kind of strong given the time period it was set in that making this the kind of special 22-minute feature-length episode as opposed to the kind of Thanksgiving one basically from the week before Gem Harvest would have been a much better thing to do, because I think there was just so much more interesting things going on here that it felt like this episode kind of ended really abruptly, that there was so much more to cover during this time period of this episode versus the previous episode where it felt like they actually didn't have enough going on to maybe justify the 22 minutes, which made that episode not feel as good because Bismuth was the previous 22-minute episode of the series up to then. But that's just the kind of thing with regards to the format of the series, and now that they're doing these 22-minute double-length episodes, where they're choosing to put that time into and when they're not, it just feels like a little bit of a writing issue with the show, that they don't exactly know what to devote more time to versus what they should, in terms of giving the fans, I think, what they want. So let's get into the episode. Great premise right away for the episode. Just Greg telling Steven the story of basically his first Christmas as a father, Steven's first Christmas being alive, plus the gems in the initial months after basically the death of Rose. Rose not around anymore. How they're reacting to the fact that Rose is gone, but Steven's there in her place basically, and she basically was, to some extent, sacrificed herself to bring Steven into the world, and how they feel about that. They're all kind of obviously have different personalities guarding them with this pearl, and kind of react differently to it, and that was a really good aspect of the episode that I don't think a lot of the episodes this season have really addressed so far. There's been a couple of good ones, obviously, but this definitely felt like one of the stronger ones, because you straight away got the whole reference back to how much Pearl cared about Rose, and the kind of romance aspect, that she cared about Rose so much and is very hurt by the fact that obviously Rose chose her relationship with Greg over the relationship with her, plus then decided bringing Steven into the world over staying around, and kind of Pearl dealing with that. With Amethyst, you kind of got more of the impression that it was kind of like Rose was kind of more of a mother kind of type figure to her, and kind of she's not super upset about it, but is just kind of getting used to the fact that, oh, Rose hasn't just transformed into a baby for good to kind of play the human mother kind of type thing, and that she's actually gone, and it hasn't really hit her as hard perhaps, but it was still an interesting reaction from Amethyst. But then Garnet, usually given that she's now the leader of the Crystal Gems, kind of having to accept that, okay, I'm the leader, I'm meant to know everything, but Steven as a being is so confusing, even I don't have answers to it. I suppose there's a slight kind of contradiction kind of moment in that the present she gives Steven for Christmas is a razor to shave in the future, because she knows that he'll need that, but she also is not fully aware that what he is and stuff like that, that he'll grow and so on. So I thought that was a kind of slight error within the episode, that they kind of put the joke ahead of the logic of the situation. That's always the trick when you have a character that can predict the future, that you make little mistakes like that, that she's knowledgeable enough to know that Steven will grow up enough to the point where he will grow hairs need to shave, but also in this episode the kind of whole point hasn't fully accepted everything just yet. So slight little error there, but still the fact that she's kind of just wait, Rose is still around, she's just a fusion with Steven, but the baby form is kind of more present there. And I think just in general with this episode, the whole idea that it basically made canon just a lot of the speculation about what Stephen is. That we don't know, we don't really have any answers about it, and even the gems don't have any answers about it. Even like present day in the show, we don't have any answers about it. They don't either. But they've just come to accept that he is a kind of, you know, half human, half gem, whatever that means with regards to everything. But you see the speculation of just like we obviously don't know, we haven't seen yet, probably will never seen the exact moment of like Stephen coming into being. Like, was it the case where Rose did just like transform into Stephen, or did she give birth to kind of something and then a child, and then the gem aspect kind of, as she went away, kind of transferred into Stephen, or what? We don't actually know that. And the theories that basically came out through each of the the gems are kind of echo some of the fandom kind of theories about it, in that, like, is Rose still in the gem, because obviously it's the same gemstone, just obviously now with Stephen. So like Pearl was kind of just like, okay, it's your gemstone, maybe if we take it out of Stephen and remove the kind of human aspect of this being, maybe Rose can then reform around the gem and we'll still have Stephen alive as a human. Obviously Amethyst just thought it was kind of like shape-shifting, and that Stephen, once he shape-shifts, can shift back into Pearl, into Rose, sorry, and that can, you know, fix it. And then Garnet was just like, no, it has to be a fusion, that it's just Rose merged with the baby, and at some point they can defuse and we'll have Rose back but also have Stephen there. And just them in this episode kind of having to accept that they don't actually know, that right now it's just Stephen, Rose is gone, and what that means to everyone. Plus you also had Greg, I suppose, not really knowing how to react to all of this stuff as well, in that he obviously doesn't exactly have everything figured out as a father, and especially when his son is a kind of half gem and he kind of has to, you know, deal with the little things that, like, Stephen likes to have his gem kind of showing a little bit more. And then when the gem actually does stuff, he's just really freaked out, doesn't know what to do. And just the core of the episode kind of being basically, this is the kind of event that ultimately brought them all together to ultimately become Stephen's family and be the people who actually support him going forward. And as much as there are still little things with each of them that they miss Rose, that they accept in this episode that it is the fact that it's Stephen and not Rose anymore. So I really did enjoy the exploration of that throughout this episode. I just felt like the reason I at the start said that this should have been a 22-minute episode is that I feel there was so much more you could have done, just with regards to continuing the episode like immediately on after where it ended. That, okay, they now accept that, why don't we like maybe just have a little time skip and then go into the second half of the episode, that they have Stephen on his first birthday or something like that. Maybe just little flashbacks for the next like 11 minutes to cover like them accepting the fact that Stephen's growing up, like them seeing that happen. Like you had that really emotional moment where kind of Pearl, you could tell maybe doesn't necessarily agree with what Rose did, but kind of repeats the kind of real reasoning that Rose gave to everyone for why she was willing to kind of give up her own kind of being to bring Stephen into the world. That, you know, humans are kind of amazing, you can see them grow and so on, but she clearly didn't believe it. Maybe show them actually experiencing that. Show them watching like Stephen grow, or and even just Greg. Like obviously the first time they saw Greg is very different than the way he is now. Like he's obviously older, he's kind of physically changed a bit. And then especially Stephen as he grows, as maybe he talks for the first time, them kind of beginning to understand that, and them understand humanity more and kind of get what's kind of going on here. That and especially with what they're kind of going for more towards the end of season 3 with this whole idea that, okay, you know, Stephen's growing, but he's also now growing into his powers as well, to the point where he's getting on that level of power level of Rose Quartz. But he's also kind of experiencing like what she did in the past, and is maybe taking different paths to her, and how he's dealing with that. That maybe he may end up making right some of the mistakes that Rose made in the past, and part of Rose being willing to kind of, you know, pass everything that she is on to Steven is that she kind of saw that maybe he, as like a, you know, half and half gem, half human, could be the one to, you know, bring peace back to things, change the homeworld mentality, maybe make humans more accepting of gems, or whatever. Something like that is kind of something with her ideals. But I do ultimately feel that what this episode presented to us, even though it didn't give us any answers, just the fact that it presented other characters speculating about what Steven is, to me means that they're aware that this is a big thing within the fan base, and I think it means that at some point we will get the answers that we want. It's just about how they execute those answers, how they go about telling us that, and I think part of it is that they have to do a scene at some point where Steven somehow comes into contact with Rose and is able to communicate with her. A lot of people thought this would happen during the finale of season 3, where obviously Steven's floating through space just in the bubble. I think people's initial speculation for that episode would have been that, alone in space, the only thing he can do is kind of like, I suppose to some extent, meditate on his gem to keep the bubble alive, and maybe then deep in the gem he would find an aspect of his mother still there, but like a final message, use her last ounce of strength, still alive, to kind of communicate with Steven for one last time and tell him something about himself, something very meaningful, powerful. And I still think something like that to some extent needs to happen, where like he actually communicates with his mother, and maybe we get some of the slight issues back and forth that have been presented towards the end of season 3 about Rose, that maybe she wasn't the perfect person we thought she was, and she kind of tells the truth, and more of the reasoning behind obviously some of the choices that she made. But in general, like, I think that's the thing with this episode. It's just very interesting, you know, themes that they approached. Very interesting time period, of course. You know, there was the previous episode, like, that was something similar to this. You know, like it was Greg babysitting someone, and that wasn't like the greatest episode. But this one, just having like young Steven in play, and the impact of like that happening so quickly, how so soon during this episode, was very, very well done, I think. So I think that's more or less all I want to say about the episode. It's just, yes, it did feel like it ended just a little too abruptly, just with, they kind of to some extent accept that Steven is Steven and Rose isn't around anymore, and then they just kind of ended it with us kind of assuming that after this is when all the kind of better stuff with regards to their all relationship and, you know, them kind of becoming a family to some degree happens. I would have liked to have seen maybe just like one scene, like mix around the time a little bit more, and just maybe a scene at the end of like in the past, something, you know, more kind of understanding with the gems happening. Maybe a little time period skipped to like the following Christmas after that event or something like that. But you know, it was a really, really nice episode. Definitely much more like what I expect from the show at this point in its run. You know, getting towards the very middle of season 4, and hopefully we're more on track towards some better episodes to hit the mid-season and then hit the second half of the season. I hope they finally get the plot going, because like as good as this episode was, it was kind of just, in terms of the present-based stuff, a kind of Christmas episode of just like, let's tell a story, look back at the past. It was an important look back at the past, but it still doesn't inherently advance the story going forward, or give us a ton of stuff about the characters present day. So that's something that the show still needs to do, and something that I think a lot of people are still very frustrated with the show, that it hasn't injected anything into the plot to get it going. At this point, I really think they just have to commit to Yellow Diamond arriving, and that's kind of the big step into motion for the plot for the rest of the season. So, yeah, that is my review for this episode, Three Gems and a Baby. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode, as well as what I've said about the episode. But I'll just end by saying, if you want to follow me on social media, links to my Twitter and Tumblr are in the description below. And then if you want to support my channel so I can make more videos, better videos, links in the description to my Patreon campaign and also my PayPal donation link. But that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.